Well, I hope you're all excited about seeing this presentation, but I can guarantee to you, I am more excited than you. I am really looking forward to doing this. Before we get going, I want to have some terminology understood so that we're all on the same page. We're going to start with what is the solar system. The solar system, in our particular case, are a collection of planets that revolve around our star, which is the sun. As you can imagine, getting time on using the Hubble telescope is extremely difficult. And every second of every day is meticulously planned. So there was a proposition that was promoted at one point in time that said, we want to point the Hubble telescope at an area of space where we don't see anything. Doesn't appear to be any stars or anything that is of noteworthy. A black patch of sky. Something like that right there. Now, put your imagination caps on here. If all of us in the room here were encompassed in a big dome, and we were to take a sewing needle, and we were to stick that sewing needle up in the ceiling somewhere, and we're going to try to look at the eye of that sewing needle. That little teeny, tiny, microscopic point up in the sky. That's what we're looking at here in this particular example. So they pointed the Hubble up at that black patch of sky, and they turned on the camera, and they started taking an exposure. And the exposure turned out to last for 10 full hours. Why? Because the light coming from that very far off distant place was so faint that it required a super long exposure to make it happen. Every point of light that you see in this image is not a star. Every point of light that you see in that image is a galaxy. So in that one tiny pixel in our imaginary dome, there were 3,000 galaxies, each galaxy containing somewhere between 200 and 400 billion stars. Imagine that replicated there and there and there and there and there and everywhere. Our technology is progressing at a very rapid pace. 500 years ago, we sailed around the globe for the first time, and that took 3 years. Today, we can travel around the Earth in a few hours. Technology. 1903, Wilbur and Orville Wright were the first men to fly in an airplane. 65 years later, man walks on the moon. We as humans have the brilliance and the technology to actually send Voyager through the rings of Saturn and take photos. I mean, it's crazy stuff. Now, Voyager was on a trajectory to leave our solar system and to go out into the great deep, out into deep space, out to where it's likely humans would never see or hear from Voyager again because it's just too far away. And before that happened, a man by the name of Carl Sagan says, you know what, let's turn Voyager around one last time and let's have it take a picture of Earth. Now it's way out there. And so it takes this picture of Earth, and Earth is a tiny speck amongst billions of stars. I mean, you can't even, he calls it a mode of light in the sunbeam. Tiny speck. And so Carl Sagan came up with this idea of the pale blue dot. And so I want to dedicate this next piece of the presentation to this wonderful vision of this pale blue dot. As we look out into the cosmos, we see that the estimation is about 100 billion galaxies reside in our universe. And we live in a galaxy called the Milky Way. The Milky Way is composed of 250 billion stars. And on one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way resides a rather insignificant planet. A small, or insignificant star, I should say. And around that star revolves a small blue planet called Earth. This is our home. On it, everyone you know, everyone you love, every human being that ever was, lived their lives out on this small blue dot. Every philosopher, every poet, every dreamer, every educator, every young couple in love, every mother and father, every child, every saint and every sinner, every person that ever existed did so on this pale blue dot floating in the vastness of space. And so, as we look back on this distant image of our home, it's imperative that we begin to understand that we need to be more understanding of one another, and we need to protect and to preserve that only place that we can call our home, that pale blue dot. Thank you.